Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside Government, a show brought to you by CUDDY Community College, Time Warner Communications, Verizon Fios, ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, as well as the college's radio station, WIN 89.1. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. Well, election year 2016 is over. We move on back to public policy, away from forums and events like that. But one item that has been a continual thread, at least for the last several months, has been the issue of water quality in Owasco Lake. And as you know, before we started getting into the forums several weeks ago, we had a number of individuals on, both from OWL, the Owasco Watershed Lake Association, as well as the city and the county, to talk about Owasco Lake and lake quality issues. This came to the fore maybe in part because of the issue of blue-green algae blooms that occurred at the end of the summer of 2016 and how it impacted the city's water system. Seth Jensen, the Director of Municipal Utilities, came on to talk about how it impacts the slow sand filters at the city's program on the southeast side of the city of Auburn. But today we're going to be talking about largely through a city update of issues related to the environment, but the two largest issues that have faced us are the issue of Owasco Lake and water quality, and also this issue that has come up in recent weeks of liquid landfill materials being transported through, in part, the city of Auburn from Seneca Meadows. Joining us today are City Councilors Terry Cuddy, who is in his just finishing his third year as a member of the Auburn City Council, and freshman Jimmy GIANNETTINO, who joined the City Council last January. Mr. Cuddy has been here before on a number of other matters, but this is Councilor GIANNETTINO's first time here. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you, Guy, for having us.
Thank you. So, delighted to have you here. This is an issue that's not going away, but for those who may not, when we were last on talking about this subject before the forums, the city was still doing testing, the state was still doing testing. There had been the appearance of blue-green algae in Owasco Lake. It had gotten into the water systems, it seemed, both for the city of Auburn and the town of Owasco. Town of Owasco serves both the town and Fleming, and the city serves about 45,000 other people. Correct on those numbers, roughly?
Yes,
Okay.
the numbers are correct, but just technically the blue-green algae would get into the treatment plant, but when it would break down, it would create the toxins, which is what we're mostly concerned about. So, that's one of the things that we want to make clear is that it is from blue-green algae, but it's when it gets into the drinking water and breaks down, that's when the cyanotoxins occur. And as of recently, because of the weather getting cooler, the cyanotoxins have decreased, but we don't want to wait on, the city doesn't want to wait on, and for that matter, the county or anybody in this region doesn't want to wait to address this issue. So we're reaching out to state and federal officials to really look at this issue, because we're the first city that has had this issue in their drinking water, the microcystins from cyanobacteria.
So we'll come back to this, but I noticed that you mentioned people in the city, the county, and the region, but you didn't include the state necessarily in that. So we'll come back to that in a moment. So for those of you who have been paying attention to the lake for years, and I know you were very involved almost 20 years ago in the Smith Corona issue, which was toxins going through their system, ending up through Moravia into the inlet. And we may come back to that issue as well. But from your two perspectives, what do you think the state of Owasco Lake is today?
I would say that I would call it impaired. We are on the 303D list of impaired water bodies.
What does that mean?
It is a list of impaired water bodies that's prepared by the DEC and submitted to the EPA for approval. There are different sections on that list. In 2014, we have been on the 303D list since 1998. In 2014, we were added to Section 1, which requires the establishment of a TMDL.
We're going to get away from acronyms. This is what is a TMDL?
Total maximum daily load.
Okay, we're going to come back to that because that's just one piece of this, but continue. I'm
Sure.
sorry.
No, that's fine. So for 2 years, we were on that list. The 2016 draft list has been submitted by the DEC.
And this was recently released. Am I correct on this? Is this the one that was just mentioned recently in the newspapers?
There is a 2016 draft list that is being submitted to the EPA for approval right now.
Okay.
On that list.
September.
September. Okay, that's okay. I want to just make sure. That's recent to me. All right.
And on that list, we are being moved from Section 1, requiring the establishment of a TMDL, to Section 3A for further verification.
Okay.
And that's one of the concerns that we have.
So over the years, one of the items that has always come up is the Owasco Watershed Lake Association has had this Owasco Lake Day, and the traditional speaker someday in there is always Professor Halfman
Yes.
out of the Finger Lakes Institute, which is over at
Yes.
Hobart. He had originally, when he first spoke, he had suggested that Owasco Lake was one of the worst when it came to the Finger Lakes, and it's not just 5, but multiple lakes he would examine. Do you still think that's the case?
Well, I think Owasco Lake has a lot of challenges. Number one, it has one of the, considering its size and its depth, has one of the largest watersheds. So the square miles, it's
400
over
something square miles.
Yes,
or something like that.
it's very large. So, so it has some challenges. But one of the things that I think, Professor Halfman has done is begin to articulate what some of the what some of the issues are, and he's identified it as the phosphorus. And
So for those who don't have a science background,
yes, well,
phosphorus is what?
well, it's a nutrient that when it is introduced into a water body, obviously it's going to create growth, and along with nitrogen, what it does is it eventually turns into if there's enough loading into the lake, it can cause problems such as blue-green algae.
So when you talk to John Foster, your son, who is what, 6?
He is 6 years old. Yes.
He hears the word nutrient and he thinks, well, that's a good thing, because I'm told at school about nutrients, and I talk about nutrients from apples and bananas and everything. This is not the good nutrient.
Yeah, it's not good for
Okay.
lakes. Yeah, absolutely. It's actually, it causes what's known as eutrophication, and the eutrophication really is what can really impair the lake. So what we're
So where does the phosphorus come from?
well, it can come from stormwater runoff. It can come from various wildlife, waterfowl, CAFOs. It can come from
CAFOs are what?
concentrated animal feeding operations.
Which there are several in Q County.
There are,
Okay.
and so I
We're an
guess
ag community, and
we are an
and we
ag
have a lot of
community.
cows here.
And I think one of the things that what the city wants to do is that I think everyone knows what the problems are. I think the issue is how the differences in how we're going to address that. And one of the things that what the city council has identified as the TMDL is basically a comprehensive plan, and it has the authority and is required by law that since Owasco Lake is on the 303D list, that a TMDL should be required by law to be developed, adopted, and implemented. And
So let's take it step by step. So
Sure.
a total maximum daily load, TMDL,
yes,
is a list,
no, the 303D is the list
okay?
that
What's the TMDL
the
then?
TMDL is what if your lake is prioritized, and
So who
it earns
prioritizes?
the DEC.
So does the city of Auburn come up with a list, submit it to the DEC, and they sign off on it?
No, what happens
Of course
is that
not, 'cause that would make it easy.
The DEC is required to evaluate all the water bodies. Could be streams, could be ponds, could be any water body in the state. Actually, any water body in the United States, because it's a federal law that requires that this list be made. Once the list is made, the states, it goes to the EPA, but the states are the ones that are in control of who gets a TMDL. So Owasco Lake has been impaired on and off since 1998. And what we are asking to do, especially now since the microcisterns have entered our drinking water supply, that we want to be proactive before it reaches an advisory level. We want to have it be addressed. The first thing that we've asked the governor to do is asked him to request it is that our treatment plants, both the Auburn and Owasco treatment plants, have a thorough study, and that thorough study should yield best available technology to basically stop the mycotoxins from to best how to treat those mycotoxins.
So if you do this, and this is part of this TMDL process.
Actually, that's not part of the TMDL process.
Oh, it is
that's
not,
the
okay.
first ask, because we need to take care of that first.
So
that's the short term.
So having been with the city some time ago and having
Yes.
helped set up a $62 million upgrade, I'm assuming the water system may need some upgrades.
Yes.
Who pays for that?
Well, we're in the middle of an upgrade as we speak. The water pump station has been, we bonded for that a couple of years ago, and the work is actually being done now. So that's part of it. But as we're doing that, we've had this issue come to the fore, as you said, and we need to further study so that we can upgrade it to take care of this specific problem, which is the blue-green algae and the microsystems that are derived from that.
Do we have a preliminary idea of how much this may all cost?
We don't.
We don't, and that's the thing is I think we were all caught off guard, and I think that we're trying. First of all, we reach out to the state, but in the meantime, city staff is doing a preliminary study. But again, I think that we really need the kind of authority and oversight of the EPA, the DOH, and the
Department of Health.
and the DEC working in concert.
Department of Environmental Conservation.
This is something I think is very complex, and we need the kind of authority and oversight to really manage this in a proper way.
So, Councilor, I thought I had read somewhere, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong. This again went from the one list, the Section 1, to the 303 list.
No, the 303D list is the list.
There's
different sections.
But moved from Section 1 to this new one in 2014.
2016.
2016. But this issue had come up in 2014. Am I correct on this?
Right, we were on Section 1 of the list in 2014.
And I thought I had read somewhere, and it may have been attributed to you, but if it's not, tell me if it's right or wrong. The state should have been addressing this, as far as many of you are concerned,
Correct.
back in
Yes.
20. That's where I'm going.
Yes.
With
Right,
this.
so the EPA mandates that once you're on Section 1 of that list, that a TMDL is created and adopted within 2 years' time frame.
So, separate from the assessment of the water filtration plants, where are you in the process of developing this total maximum daily load?
That's part of
Provision.
that's part of our ask to the state.
Hasn't
to
been
A,
developed.
keep
So they
us-
haven't even started this.
No. And we might even be moved off the list, or we're deferred. And I think,
Deferred because everything got bettered, or they don't want to deal
no,
with it?
Well, one of the things that they're focusing on that I think that is one of the, if you will, red herrings, is that if we focus just on phosphorus and the threshold that has been deemed by the DEC, and from what I understand, not for drinking water, but just for ponded waters, and from our readings of it, the threshold is 20 parts per billion phosphorus load, and we were within in 2014 and 2015, we were within that range, but this year we were slightly below, and that technicality is what is keeping the DEC being hesitant of having the TMDL.
Hesitant because they believe things have gotten better, or hesitant
Well,
because it's more work?
Just to say, just to make sure that this does. There were some upgrades in the Groton and Moravia wastewater treatment plants.
And it was Groton originally, which was the Smith Corona item
Yes,
in 1992.
Yes, so there was some been upgrades there. So I mean, we can't say, but there is an assumption that might have done something to the phosphorus. But regardless, we had a drought this year. There was the stormwater runoff. decrease. There's so many variables.
So the big three, excuse me if I can interrupt here for a second. So the DEC in their report that was released in September, it looks like, said there are 3 pollutant sources. Waterfowl. So unless there's a lot more geese and a lot more animals than we ever saw before, that's one. Habitat alterations, and I'm assuming that is habitat for whether you're an animal or you're humans. If you start paving over more land and there's less permeable space, water's got to go somewhere. So more driveways, more roads, whatever, that's an issue. But the other piece that is in this assessment has been this issue of clear runoff of nutrients from farmlands in the water as a contributing to the problem facing this vital natural resource. Do you agree with that premise?
That's what, in both, when you look at the, when to require TMDL.
And that was from the citizen.
And that's right on the EPA's guidelines. It's like, whether it be pathogens or nutrients, those are the things that cause that in water bodies, all of those. So what we want to do, what a TMDL does, is that basically it's a comprehensive plan. It maps out the watershed in a very rigorous manner.
So let's walk through that problem. Who sets the levels for the TMDL? Is it the state?
The state does, but the US EPA is trying to create what are known as numeric nutrient criteria.
So Washington and Albany will have to sign off on this in some form, one way or the other.
If it's a TMDL, yes.
If it's a TMDL,
Okay.
absolutely.
But it's not arbitrary that the city goes out and the city council says these are the levels we want to have.
No.
We can't.
You had sent me some
We're not
mathematical numbers, which
professional.
are well beyond me.
We're not the.
Okay.
We're not the. We're not the engineers. We're not the scientists. We're the elected representatives that are very concerned about our drinking water, very concerned about the future of our lake, and very frankly, very concerned about the Finger Lakes, because the problem isn't unique to us, but we are, as it has been said, we are the canary in the coal mine.
So I was going to leave this to the end, but I guess now's the time to talk about this, is that the DEC and the EPA, but more so the DEC, has been under heavy review because of everything that happened up in Hoosick Falls near Albany. And drinking water, and there's a blame game, and everybody points. The only people who seem to be pointing to consistently is the legislature to the DEC. Do you have faith in that the DEC will do the right thing in this matter?
I believe so. I mean, we have to trust the system, and one of the things that I believe we
I
need
can
to
tell you
do-
a lot of voters who didn't say that last week.
I understand that, and again,
Millions of them.
I understand that, but again, from my perspective and my experience, we have used laws to protect, our drinking water in the past. I mean, you mentioned the Smith Corona.
But you fought you and 2 other fellows.
Yeah, well,
for the
there's a lot
most
more
part.
than us.
There were
There's a lot more
no,
than
but
us.
back then there were 3 of you. Now City Clerk Chuck Mason, Mark Miller, who lives in the town of Senate. The 3 of you were, and there were a lot of others.
Aikman and
Well, but the people
there's a
who
lot of
took
people.
and I understand, but the people I met with on a regular basis were the 3 of you, on a regular basis at City Hall about this issue of Smith Corona. So I'm going to call you the ringleaders. With that in mind, that still took 2 years.
Absolutely. Anything that is as substantial as the restoration of especially a lake like Owasco Lake is going to take a lot of work. I mean, that's the thing, is that it's going to be extremely hard, but we just got to continue to push and to use the documentation, show the DEC, well, Angleville Pond got this consideration, Bear Lake got this consideration. Why is Owasco Lake not getting this consideration as a primary drinking water source?
So has the city met with the DEC? Have you talked to them?
Yes, there's been conversations. Those meetings have been more or less, city, county, DOH, DEC officials, ag and markets. So the meetings are very preliminary. Everyone's trying to assess the situation.
So it's information gathering versus
in the
action.
meantime, well, there's been discussion. There's the part of the discussion was that the county has moving forward with what is known as a 9E plan, and the 9E plan is has some components that are very valuable and would work with the TMDL, but it is the city's I guess position that the TMDL should be the anchor that drives the 9-element plan.
The county.
Well, it's a watershed plan, so it's not really the county, but it's basically, I really think that, having, an approval letter that is on EPA letterhead, basically saying that that Owasco Lake has a TMDL, that we can really begin to address this issue with this lake.
And how far away are you from that?
As we're working, we need to act fast on two fronts to basically upgrade our treatment plants to make sure we can handle it in the immediate emergency. But we really think that Owasco could serve as a model for
Owasco
how
Lake, not the town of
Owasco
Rockland.
Lake
Okay.
could serve as a model for how we can work as a community with the DEC and the EPA and really take on this issue of blue-green algae and water quality and drinking water in a meaningful way, so that we can bring Owasco Lake back to a place where children can swim in it and boat in it, and we can finally, be rest assured
Okay.
that our water is safe.
So,
to drink.
Councilor, right now the city is the regulators for the watershed. Am I correct?
Not for the watershed. We oversee the watershed inspection program, right? We help fund that. Would you say that?
Well,
I don't
who's
think we're the
who's responsible?
overseers
I
of
thought the
it.
city oversees the watershed. They have the regulatory to within limits.
Within limits.
Okay, so let's talk about the limits. What are the limits? Because so when we advertise this, we get questions,
Right.
and one of
Yes.
those has been this issue of agricultural runoff. And the comment that was made by a writer who sent an email was that if you're a city official regulating ag, they get it. But once you get outside the city of Auburn, it's a political non-starter, and that agricultural runoff is the larger problem here compared to waterfowl and habitat alteration. Would you agree with that? With the idea that that's the bigger issue, is ag runoff, not necessarily whether it's a political non-starter.
Well, I think there's a lot of issues. I mean, that's one of the issues. I mean, there's 5 golf courses within the watershed, right? They contribute phosphorus to the lake as well. Is agriculture a large portion of it? Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, but I don't think we should point fingers at one source of pollutant to the lake, right? I think there's a lot of contributing factors, and I think all of them need to be addressed.
And one of the things that come with the TMDL is the idea of a standard, and the idea of a criteria that is established in the U.S. EPA law. That's what we're looking for.
I mean, the TMDL in layman's terms is a pollution budget, right? So it's a pollution budget for the lake, how much pollution that lake can handle.
So how do you regulate that?
Well, I mean, if there's standards and it's mandated, I think the stakeholders are more willing to comply if there is more of a oversight by the EPA. And if New York does begin to adopt what the EPA wants states to do, which is a numeric nutrient criteria, once there is a standardized number, it would be much more valuable when approaching the various pollutant sources, whether it be point or non-point sources, when we can say, like, this can't happen because this pollutant source is basically affecting this particular part of the lake. I mean, it's much more, I guess, rigorous than what I've seen.
We're not going to get to
past.
Seneca Meadows in a second, because we only have 5 minutes left, and time flies here. Last night, on the 14th, there was a meeting at BOCES, Onondaga BOCES,
Yes.
of a group. Who is that group?
It is Save Owasco Now,
Okay.
and basically
So what did they talk about?
Well, they talked about trying to Patty Beer, one of the founding members of Save Owasco Now, and also part of CAFA. I was part of CAFA and Save Owasco Now.
CAFA was what?
CAFA was Cayuga Anti-Fracking Alliance.
Okay.
And one of the things that she mentioned was we started, Save Owasco Now was started based on this drinking water concern. Mm-hmm. And what she said is that we got very involved, and we were asking questions with the local officials, and there was a meeting at Aula, and she felt that that she wanted to do something more. So she basically.
So I got to ask you some quick questions,
Sure.
or else we're going to run out. How many people attended last night?
I would say about between 45 and 50.
And when is the next meeting?
The next meeting is December 12th.
And where will that be?
That will be at Cayuga Onondaga BOCES as well.
Roughly what time? Do you know?
6 o'clock.
Okay, and I'm assuming there'll be media announcements.
There will be, yes. We have a Facebook page.
Can anybody attend?
Absolutely.
And do you have to pay to be a member?
No, it's really a loose knit group. We're not, there's no 501c3 status. We, Cayuga Anti-Fracking Alliance was a group of concerned citizens.
I know, but 3 years ago you saturated City Hall with hundreds of signatures.
They were concerned citizens.
Okay.
That's what.
Well, that's
we
what I'm
are.
saying. It's more than just loose. You were organized.
We were organized, but we sometimes. Patty Beer called us a SWAT team, and I kind of like that analogy. We, what made Cayuga Anti-Fracking Alliance successful is that our ask was very specific, and our ask for Save Owasco Now is very specific.
Okay.
Is that we need immediate help to our treatment plants, and that Auburn and Owasco Lake has earned to stay on the 303D list and have a TMDL, developed, adopted, and implemented.
All right, Councilors, real quickly, we have about a minute and
Sorry.
a half. No, I just want to, because I said we would talk about two things. What is this issue of the transportation of liquid landfill materials from Seneca Meadows? What are the liquid
materials known as leachate? Any landfill
it's
produces
leachate.
that.
Okay, it's leachate.
Yeah, it's a liquid byproduct of a landfill. Seneca Meadows is asking to transfer 6 to 9 truckloads of that a day to the Finger Lakes Railroad.
For how long?
The initial ask was 2 weeks to 2 months. When they came to council,
And this would be over by State Street in that area where there's a transfer
Frank
station.
Smith, yep.
Okay. Where does it stand right now?
Well, where it stands right now
Because
is
they were supposed to start today.
Yes.
Okay.
There is a permitting process. We are in discussions with them about that permitting process, so it has not started yet.
Does the city have to sign off? Or is this a state sign
That,
off?
well, that's where it gets dicey because this is not the final destination for it.
Okay.
The final destination is New Jersey. We're also in 2 different DEC regions, Seneca
we
Meadows
are.
and us. So there is some gray area there. Our legal staff is working with the DEC right now.
But there's no transportation occurring today, correct?
My understanding is no.
And when this all gets done, is this a direct result because of the upgrades through the Regional Economic Development Council to that site on John Smith?
That was not brought up in the discussion.
Okay.
They could do it in Seneca Falls, but they
So why aren't they?
Because they're transporting grain and fertilizer there, and they thought to limit the truck traffic out there, they would try to spread it out.
Would you rather have grain?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And Finger Lakes Railroad has been very good. They have a very good safety record with us, and they're trying to work with us to come to a
But it's the
reasonable
materials
solution.
you're concerned
Absolutely.
about. All right. I'd love to have you both back in the spring. We're running out of time.
Okay.
We do want to thank our guests have been City Councilors Jimmy Giannettino and Terry Cuddy, who've been on to talk to us about this issue of Owasco Lake and water quality, as well as this issue, and we really talked about it very quickly about leachate coming in through the city of Auburn to be transported on trains. We'd love to have them back on in the spring. We will be back next week with 2 regular editions of Inside Government and Beyond the Front Page. On Inside Government, we will have County Legislative Chairman Keith Batman, as well as County Administrator Suzanne Sinclair. And on Beyond the Front Page, we'll be talking to this department, the college's telecom director, to talk about the college's programs, and that's Steve Keeler. We'll be back right after Thanksgiving with 2 final shows at this point from both ends of the spectrum. We'll have Santa Claus in the studio, as well as Congressman John Katko, we hope, to talk about his election win last week. You can contact us with your ideas for questions for whether it's the Congressman or Santa at cozguytho@aol.com, or Inside Government, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. I'm Guy Cosentino for CUDDY Community College. We hope you'll stick around. We're going to have a discussion with the United Way in just a moment about the United Way campaign and Beyond the Front Page, on Beyond the Front Page and the Warm to Children program. Otherwise, we'll see you here in the studio next week.